is collectively, either through the programs with the NGOs or in partners with the Impact Hub. Yeah. Okay, now this paradigm shift, what is happening here? Well, I think, and accelerated through COVID, but already going on for quite some time, the global economy is in a really big shift. And this is something that I learned as a technology investor, because you are paid for by your investors to look for the next big thing. And the next big thing can be technology enabled, but it can also be demographically enabled. Yeah, more older people, for instance. The silver generation in Europe is a big driver of change, but also environmental change. Climate change opens up significant opportunities for innovation in climate protection and climate mitigation, and so on. So these kind of changes, they change the how, the what, the where, and the for whom. Yeah. So technology like automation, artificial intelligence, digitization, digital everything, Internet of Things, the fridge orders its own stuff from the supermarket, and so on, are changing the how. Demographic, economic, political, and environmental change, aging populations, global middle class. Since 2012, over 50% of the world population is now middle class. But also shifting economic and geopolitical power, many environmental crises, climate change, biodiversity collapse, etc. They really changed the who, the where, and the what. Now, in my work with the NGOs, for instance, the really exciting thing about fundraising is middle income markets and the rising middle class in middle income markets. So big environmental NGOs, for instance, are much more excited about call center workers as donors in Manila alone, than about the combined donor of Austria, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic and Slovenia taken together, because there's more of them than they have a donor audience in these countries here. So those are fundamental shifts. Now, these are all quantifiable. You can touch them, you can, or you can measure them. They're observable, they're in the news. And that's why most businesses and most governments and most organizations, including NGOs, have them on their radar screen. And it's included in strategic planning, like I mentioned, donor shift and so on. But below that, there's really something more profound happening. And this is the purpose revolution. And it's not what we do for whom and where and how we do it, with technology, without technology, it's why. And this is changing everything, because the why, as everybody who has children knows, is always the question that is most hardest to answer. Now, all these shifts, technology, demographics, etc., they accelerate, but they don't explain this qualitative shift. It's not technology, it's teleology. Telos, the Greek for the goal, the aim, the purpose. Now, this is what is the purpose revolution. What does this mean? Well, it means that the reason why we produce, consume, invest, and so on, all our economic activity is changing. And it's changing alongside a different perspective of what value is. When we say value, a key economic concept, we tend to think about monetary or financial value, but this is no longer true. And also, we can't afford this to remain true, because we're standing in front of challenges, of problems, where we need all players, civil society, government, and business, aligned in order to solve these problems. And that means we need a completely different role for business in society. Now, what is happening is that the concept of value is going from material financial terms to include more, especially societal, human value, and ecological benefit. Now, this will bring very, very big changes. And if you are a fossil fuel company, it's problems, this change. And if you are a renewable energy or an electrical vehicle company like Tesla, it brings opportunity. And the same applies in the social sector. Now, we will look at that and what is happening there, why it's happening, how it's happening, and what this means in terms of risks and opportunities. Now, Our world is in a bad shape. Pollution, inequality, poverty, hunger, climate change, unemployment, and so on. And the traditional mechanisms, state, government, business, the market, and civil society are increasingly struggling. And why is that? Well, on addition, we now have COVID. And the question really is, what's happening here? Why is this? Now, you could say maybe this is down to greed. You can see here the unregulated US pharma market, where drug prices for very basic medicine, which cost almost nothing, are a multiple, many times, sometimes 100 times more expensive than they are in Canada or here in Europe. That's maybe one explanation. Another one is that, well, maybe we've got the wrong priorities, or we're just plain stupid and don't get it. Well, I think none of those are true. It's really about bad design. And bad design of what? Well, of our institutions. And our institutions are the rules how we conduct our affairs, how we do business, what role business has in society, and how that works. Now, at the moment, all of that is really very material, a very narrow definition of value. And this narrow definition means that a lot of costs, such as pollution or exploitation, or exclusion, are not accounted for in the accounts of a company, of a firm. And some significant utility, good stuff, is not accounted for. For instance, quality of life improvements and inclusion and opportunity and all of that, which means that financial profit is creating a lot of wrong incentives. We get too much of bad stuff and too little of good stuff. And that means we're spending our resources, in particular our monetary resources, but also our lifetime, on the wrong things. Well, now, how could better design look like? Well, it's the vision of an economy that is safe and just, and it's called the donut economy. It looks like this. Well, not quite, but almost. It looks like this. In the center, in the smaller circle, you have the concept of a social floor. Everything that we owe each other as humans, almost from a human rights perspective: food, health, access to basic services like water, energy, and so on, but also rights: gender equality, social equity, political voice, peace, justice, and so on. And at the same time, we have the planetary boundaries, an ecological ceiling over which we should not go. And this applies to climate, the ozone layer, air pollution, biodiversity loss, and so on. And those two taken together, the floor and the ceiling, create this circle. And in the middle, in the light part, the safe and just space for humanity, is the vision of a regenerative and distributive just society. Now, the problem is it looks like this. So we have very significant social shortfalls, needs not met, and we have very significant ecological overshoot. Now, the purpose economy, if you like, is about addressing these social shortfalls, which is what we're focused on here, but also reversing or slowing down or deaccelerating the ecological overshoot. Now, this is what Stephen Hawking called a cathedral project. And he called that a part of humanity's attempt to bridge heaven and earth. Ideas started by one generation with the hope and the trust that they will be carried on by future generations. And this is what humans are best at. Most of the very significant achievements of humanity, from wherever we started walking on two legs up until now, are this kind of project: massive collaboration to advance a common purpose. And this is what brings out the best in us, not making more money. And this is also where the qualitative difference of a mission-driven, a purpose-driven organization is. Now, this is the cathedral for the 21st century, the SDGs. It's not because it's so beautiful, but because everybody is getting behind it and is understanding that. So you can look at the SDGs as a roadmap for the purpose economy. Now, there's been a report out 3 years now, which put a value of $12 trillion. This is $12,000 billion of business opportunities, but for only 4 sectors: food, health, cities, and energy. So zero hunger, number 2, Health is number 3. Cities number 11, and energy I think is 7. Yeah. Now, and that would create 380 million jobs, almost the entire population, or more than the population of the United States. Yeah. This is the Business and Sustainable Development Commission 2017. I think those numbers are too low, way too low. Yeah. The opportunity, the economic opportunity, not to talk about the human and the environmental opportunity of regeneration and inclusion, is much, much bigger than that. Not just because this is only 4 out of 17 sustainable development goals, but because most of them are undervalued. Let's just take one opportunity. Here's a good book. It's called Drawdown, and it looks at the 100 most effective climate interventions. And it puts some numbers on it. Yeah? The cost-benefit ratio of the best 80 is roughly 2.7 times. So for every dollar invested, you get a financial return of 2.7. But then there is things like land use, where the return is 20 times. Yeah? Food, 13 times. Yeah? Energy, 4 times. Cities, 4 times. Yeah? So if you put all of that together, climate change mitigation is what just 1 out of 17 SDGs is a market opportunity worth $80 trillion. This is roughly 1 time global GDP. Yeah. So even if you say there's replacement effects, like, okay, all fossil energy goes out and is replaced by something, so we lose at least fossil energy and so on, there's some shrinkage, but still, maybe that's half of 40 trillion, and it's still 50% of global GDP growth opportunity. And that's one SDG. We're not talking about education, healthcare, access to water, protection of biodiversity above land and below water, and so on and so on. And these are similar numbers. So actually, if you look at it through this lens, the purpose economy is probably the biggest economic, entrepreneurial, and investment opportunity humanity has ever seen. And why is that? Because you could say, I don't know, the Industrial Revolution or the Internet Revolution and so on, they've been big. Yeah, but still, even if we digitize everything, yeah, it will only, there's some estimate that automation, digitization will affect between 30 and 45% of all jobs. Well, great, that's a lot, yeah, makes a big difference. But first of all, only half of humanity has jobs. So we're actually talking about 15 to 20% of humans who are affected by automation directly in their work. Yeah. Now this, the purpose revolution, affects everything. Yeah, not just work, but production, investment, how we grow food, how we care for each other, everything. Yeah. Now, what's happening here? Well, in the past, in the 19th century, it was an either-or world. Yeah, you make money or you do good, and that is mutually exclusive. Yeah, because the way companies were set up, think about Charles Dickens or Manchester capitalism and all that in the 18th and 19th century, it was virtually mutually exclusive. Either you make money or you do good for people, and one you do in church or through your philanthropy, and the other one is in your companies. Yeah? And this is traditional business and charity. Now that has moved on. Clearly, we've had the social welfare state and environmental protection laws and all that kind of stuff in the last century. And the view was those can sit alongside, or the effects need to be balanced. Yeah? And there's been some pretty avant-garde stuff like microfinance or renewable energy and the first iteration of social business. But what's happening now is that we move from as well as to the purpose economy. And this is that there is no profit if you're not regenerative and inclusive. You will not be allowed to. People won't buy your stuff. People won't come and work for you. Yeah. And the state won't let you. Yeah. Now here, impact, doing good, is not a cost factor, it's a driver of value, and probably the driver of value. Yeah? And this is what we're talking about. Now, if you think about why you are here, why your organizations exist, this is exactly why they exist. The only difference to a business is that you're not necessarily trading, transacting, selling stuff. And that's what we're going to learn in this program. Now, I've talked about paradigm shifts before, and this is similar. Yeah? This is like the development of agriculture 15,000 years ago, the scientific revolution and industrial revolution 200-300 years ago, or the information revolution 25 years ago. Yeah? But there's three reasons why this paradigm shift from to the purpose economy is happening now. One is we need to. Second, we can. And third, we want to. I'm going to skip that. Now, we need to. Well, it's pretty clear that things can't go on as they do now. Yeah? Our current way of conducting the economy is destructive. The way we produce, consume, invest, organize ourselves is wasteful, exploitative, and really stupid. Yeah? Climate change, plastics, dreadful working conditions, including COVID infections, air pollution, food waste. If food waste was a country, it would be the third largest CO2 emitter after China and the US. Yeah? So it can't go on like this. Yeah? Well, now we can also see that there is an alternative. Things can be different. Yeah? Mostly basic needs are met. Yeah? So we're well on track for zero poverty with 2030, even with COVID throwing us back. But for those of you who remember the Millennium Development Goals, when it was about halving poverty by 2015, well, that goal was achieved 3 years early. Yeah? And nobody knew whether it would work in the late 90s. That was a very aspirational goal, but it became from a principle question, is this possible, to an engineering question. How much does it cost? How do we do it? Where do we start? What is the sequence, and so on? And taking principle issues to engineering issues, that is real progress, not shooting a rover on Mars. For me, that is real human progress. Abundance. Zero marginal cost. Now, I'll explain what that is spreading into the physical world, and that changes quite a lot. Yeah. Now, most of you will have Netflix or some streaming service and for music and so on. Yeah. So we used to buy the media and on a substrate like a CD or a record and so on. But now it comes with a subscription. Yeah. And this is exactly the phenomenon. Zero marginal cost means I produce something once and then every copy is free. Now, this is very clear for a music track that is uploaded to the internet, and then every download is free, or a newspaper article and so on, yeah? As soon as it goes digital. But this phenomenon of free copies, it will spread and is already reality in the three largest sectors. First, energy. Put a solar panel on your roof, that will cost you a couple of €1,000, but then energy is free.
So Nicholas, we've got about 5 minutes left on this.
Okay, good. Transport, yeah, self-driving cars powered by solar energy, same thing. You build it once, then it's free. And with 3D printing manufacturing. So most of the economy is moving into that area. And that means scarcity, the notion that something is valuable because we don't have enough of it, is actually a thing of the past. Of course, not for everybody, yeah, but there is real possibility that this is happening, and that means people want something different, and that's where the desire for change comes from. Yeah? Now, something better doesn't necessarily mean something more of something, but better meaning better quality, more human, more meaningful, more just, more sustainable. Yeah? And we talked about material poverty, and there's still 1 billion people living in real poverty. But for me, the more heartbreaking thing is that there is a similar amount, and probably more, who are stuck in what is called bullshit jobs. Sorry for the language. This is a technical term. You can look it up. Yeah. And this means a job where the person performing the job of themselves says, this job is absolutely useless and worthless. It doesn't contribute anything to humanity, and I only do it because I need the money. Now, the material poverty, there is a path out, and there's reasons, there's objective reasons for that. The poverty of purpose is terrible because there is no reason this should be like that. Yeah? It just happened. And this is where the real magic of purpose-driven organizations resides. You have currently a monopoly on the currency of the 21st century. You have a reason to exist, which is inspiring, important, and valuable in the most literal sense of the word. Yeah? Now, what are the drivers? Well, factor markets, yeah, special capital. It said investors won't come and fund you. Trump in 2017 as we will build coal-powered power plants. Nothing happened because he didn't find the investors. Talent, the most talented people will want to work for organizations that have a purpose. Product markets, people won't buy your stuff if you're not regenerative and inclusive. And regulation, the state won't let you. The European Union is putting together quite some significant regulation on the environmental side and on the social side. I think similar things will happen. And even if you're cynical and say all of that is human-made, well, nature doesn't bargain. The planetary boundaries hold, even if you can influence factor markets, product markets, and the state government regulation, the climate boundaries they hold. So all of this is already happening. And just one example here, capital markets driving impact. This was a discussion in 2019 where US CEOs were discussing about an economy that serves all Americans. Nothing much has happened. Just shortly after that, a couple of weeks, was this announcement from the European Commission. This is the new one that came in at the time. And this is what happened, that just weeks after that, the European Investment Bank stopped funding fossil fuel projects by the end of this year. So within 18 months, one of the biggest absorber and demanders of investment capital was cut short from the biggest source of funding in the European Union. The European Investment Bank is a significant lender and is now instead putting $1 trillion, $1,000 billion into the Green New Deal. That's how things are moving, at which scale and at what speed. Now, this is the slide that really brings this home, why NGOs need to look at this. And in the second module of the inspiration track, we will look at this in more detail, how to do that. But this is why. Now, this is the funding for NGOs. 150 billion development aid, official development assistance, bilateral, multilateral, by and large, doesn't matter how exactly. And then global philanthropy, 150, 200 billion, give or take. It's pretty difficult to estimate that because some numbers include religion in the US and then it's much bigger. But let's say this. Why doesn't it matter? Because this needs funding. And how big is that? Well, that's 3 to 4 trillion. So a couple of 100 billion up or down doesn't matter because we're talking about 3 to 4,000 billion. And whether it's 3,200 or 3,400 doesn't matter. Because it's way too small. So this blue bubble should fund that big bubble in the middle. And that is every year until 2030, if we want to meet those goals. Dreadful, is it? Well, it's not, because there's this. Now, imagine the building you're sitting in, and that is the size of the bubble, which is global financial assets and global commercial activity, meaning GDP. There is 700 to 800,000 billion dollars of global financial assets, and there is around 80,000 billion dollars of global GDP every year. Now, we would need to mobilize 1% of global financial assets or 5%, redirect 5% of global economic and commercial activity in order to solve the SDGs. Just 1%, that's it.
We got about 1 minute left, Nikolaus. Okay. You have a few final thoughts.
Yeah, so this is what NGOs need to do. Not spend the 100 or 200, 300 on the blue bubble one-to-one into projects, but to use them in order to mobilize that big green ball. And how do you do that? Well, for every dollar that you spend, and this is why Redpreneur is exactly the right thing to do. We're spending the money on training, etc. But the hope is that we mobilize a much larger chunk of private finance, and private finance will only be there if there is also a financial return, because there's fiduciary duty to also get the money back. Now, I think the target for this is not 1 to 10, but because we will fail, we need to target a factor of 1 to 20. So every euro that we spend on Redpreneur should bring 15, 20 euros of private money in due course. Of course, this will take time, 1, 2, 3, 4 years maybe, but that should be the ambition, and this is why. Now, in summary, our world is changing. We're at the limits of social cohesion, planetary boundaries, and still failing billions in terms of basic needs. what is happening in the background is that everybody is aware of that. Yeah, it's not the elephant in the room. It's pretty obvious. Yeah, we need to change. There are new models, and there is a keen desire to do so. The question is how, and how can we do it more quickly? Yeah. Now, a program like Redpreneur and the businesses that we're going to work on together is one way to do that. That's why it's called an accelerator. Yeah. And with this shift to the impact economy, to the purpose economy, comes significant disruption, fossil fuels, but also great opportunity. And this sense of opportunity that I would like you to walk away with. You are not, social workers looking at something that is difficult to finance. You're in the middle of something that is the right thing to do at the right time. Being an internet entrepreneur in the early 90s was also very difficult. Because there wasn't anything was done. That's why social enterprise today, or what we still call social enterprise, is difficult. Yeah, but not because it's not the right thing to do. It's because there's very little evidence and track record if you compare it to the normal kind of business. Yeah. So in the future, you're on the right side of history. Being good is not nice to have, but core. Yeah. And mission-driven organizations of any size have what it takes, a purpose. Yeah? So I think the boundaries of progress today, they're not in technology. They're about doing what's right, yeah, and what is morally due, not necessarily what's technically possible. And that's what we're setting out to do here together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikolaus. Yeah, that was a lot of information, but very inspiring. So we've heard, we have a tall task ahead of us, but we've also heard why the people in this room are the right people to take it on, and a little bit of